Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another recap here. We have game number 8, Magnus Carlsen, Nepomniachtchi, and in this World Chess Championship match, Magnus is starting to, take a commanding lead. Not only does he have the advantage, one extra game, but he also drew effortlessly with the black pieces yesterday. Now he has the white pieces. It's his turn to press. We're just getting past the midway point of the match, and everything is pointing to Magnus. He has the white pieces. Is he going to do anything today? Because I think if the match were a draw, then Jan would be very happy to say, look, I made 2 draws after my loss, got right back on the horse, and he would really look to open things up in future rounds. So I thought that this game where Magnus had the white pieces was really important for the overall match result. You see the first move, e4. This already tells us what's going on in Magnus's head as well as his team. The move e4, first of all, you already know what Nepo is going to play. He might go into the exact same line, but he might change it up a little bit. The point is, I think you know that the move e5, knight f3, knight f6, also known as the Petrov, is going to happen on the board. So that knowledge, I think, was really helpful for Magnus's team as, over the rest day and the last couple days in general. I think that they've probably been workshopping something against this line. I'm sure they have had lots of ideas in general against this line in their preparation for the match, but that's why the first, 5 games of the match were really important. They were finding out the information that they needed for later in the match as what to expect from their opponent, Jan Nepomniachtchi. So here comes d4. A little bit different. We don't see the knight takes e5 that we had seen previously. And after d4, knight takes d4, bishop d3. We're still very much in theoretical territory. d5, knight takes e5. And after the move knight d7, the pieces were getting vacuumed off the board really easily. And I think it was very easy to call into question Magnus's preparation already because, it just looks too easy for black. Takes, and after this move, knight d2, it was, very surprising to imagine how Magnus was going to turn this into an advantage. But what really surprised me was that after the move knight d2, there are things like f5 in order to keep the knight in the middle of the board. But it allows stuff like knight f3 and knight coming into e5. So instead, Jan plays a very reasonable move. Knight takes d2, bishop takes d2. And after the move bishop d6, which is, I think, a move that you play pretty much routinely, it looks normal. White castled, and it was kind of like Jan didn't expect this move at all, or gravely underestimated it, because after short castle, it started to sink in to most people watching this game, kind of how brilliant this preparation was. If black is to just follow suit with short castle of his own, there would follow queen h5, and this hits the d pawn and the h pawn. So there's no simple way to just say g6, because queen takes d5 is a full extra pawn, and there's no trick with bishop takes h2 to win the queen, because there's still a bishop in the way. So because of that, the only way to defend both is the move f5. But f5 is really not desirable. White has options here to play bishop g5 to hit the queen, or just queen f3, let's say, and bishop f4. And this is the type of position that if you're preparing for a world championship match, I don't think you want this position. This is one where white is trying to get his rook to e5. Your pawn, if it was back on f7, would be great. This would be 0.00 on the engines. And maybe it still is, but the fact that the pawn's on f5 is a little concerning. Not only might it be a free pawn in some lines, but you can never play f6 to kick out any piece from e5. So it's just kind of that annoying edge that sits there in the position that you're not too happy with. So queen h5 suddenly becomes such an annoyance after short castle that I thought this type of preparation was really kind of brilliant, because you trade off a bunch of pieces. It seems innocuous, but queen h5 is such a big threat I mean, after this move, you wouldn't believe it, but Jan plays the move h5. And this was played after a think, which definitely indicates this was not what Jan sat at the board and wanted to play. And that's already a win for Team Magnus. If your threat of queen h5 causes your opponent to play h5 himself, first of all, what does this mean? Black is not castling, for sure, because that's going to be a hanging pawn. Queen e1 was the move played, but I mean, this move invites rook e1 check, queen f3. There's so many moves that can be played here that all look very reasonable. Rook e1 is one of the first ones for sure, but queen e1 is a little bit cunning, let's say. It has a very specific idea. When I saw this move, I was very surprised not to see queen e7 by Nepomniachtchi. And I thought this was a good reaction because if the queens trade, then rook e1 of any sort, the king would go back, right? You could even bring your king up to f6, but let's say that's another story. And to me, black was doing fine here. There's even merit to the idea of pushing h4 and h3. So I was surprised to see king f8 because king f8 allows white to go bishop b4. The whole point of queen e1 was multitasking bishop b4 and check. That's why I expected queen e7. So now bishop b4 comes on the board and the bishops are going to get exchanged. Now, why is this so important, these bishops getting exchanged? Because we saw that in the last variation as well with bishop f4. The pawns are fixed on light squares, meaning this guy is fixed on a light square, white's pawns are fixed on dark squares, and the remaining bishops after this exchange are going to be light squared bishops. And the white bishop is going to be happier than black's bishop because if you look at the pawns, white's bishop can attack black's pawn, whereas black can never attack white's pawn. So white's going to play c3 later, maybe a3. You get my point. This bishop will never be able to attack any of white's pawns in any type of endgame, middle game, etc. So that's why this exchange of pieces was so valuable for white to achieve. But also, you got this weird h-pawn, you got a king that's not castled. Clearly, Nepo was in Team Magnus's prep, and that already is a pretty serious sign of good preparation and turning an opening that didn't look like it had any luster to it into potentially a very dangerous option because Nepo is kind of felt like he was panicking here, and this opening was, to me, as soon as I saw this and the queen e1 and bishop b4, I thought it was a huge success. Whether or not Magnus wins this game, this is definitely something that Nepomniachtchi's team has to go back and double check. So we see some more moves. Rook e1, queen f6 offering the exchange. Now at this point, I thought that Nepo had done a pretty decent job because this looks very strange overall, but his king is going to find safety, and if black can exchange the queens, he'll be probably sitting quite well. h3, white doesn't want to deal with h4, h3, but also needs an escape square for the king so that he can finally pursue other moves with the queen. h4 was played, and I totally understand. I just talked about how the pawns are maybe going to start to get fixed on light squares with these light square bishops. Well, there's one for black. And I was very happy to see this move h4 by Jan because I think that in terms of the color complexes for the endgame, this move made a lot of sense for me. And Magnus, at this point, he's got his escape square. He's got, full throttle down the e-file. It's time for c4. He needs to open another front for the bishop here. Also open the third rank for the queen. And after takes b5, there's really no other way to explain the move b5 then, just the first real blunder that I've seen of the World Chess Championship match. b5 is just it feels like just a blunder, and one that's born from the desire to play too quickly, because b5, queen a3, okay, easy move to miss if we're talking about a shorter time control, but the World Championship match, you don't miss stuff like this. But queen a3, queen takes a7, hitting the bishop on d7 is an extremely devastating threat. Right, this hits the bishop, also protects the d4 pawn. and white just ends up a pawn up. If you decide to take here on c4, queen takes d7. This is protected. There's an outside pass pawn. Meanwhile, this rook is still not great. So there was a lot of reasons to like Magnus's position, and it was getting better and better. As soon as bishop takes c4 was played, queen a3 was a threat, so the move b5 unfortunately just doesn't do anything about that. And after queen takes a7, the engine certainly agrees as well, but Magnus finally had a commanding advantage. This rook is doing nothing, and I think after c4, Magnus just pretty much took this game to the bank, for lack of a better description. After c4, I think this was Nepo's last chance to come up maybe with a move like this, g5. This is in line with h4, takes over the f4 square as well for queen f4 ideas, and if you take here, you can bring the bishop to c6 or e6. Yes, there are still ideas of queen a3 and taking this pawn, but remember, after g5, number one, the king has a safe haven on g7, and number two, there are going to be ideas like g4 and trying to bust open the king side here around white's king. That's going to get very dangerous, and it's not like Magnus can just go pawn grabbing down here with no regard for the king side. So I thought that g5 was really the last attempt. b5 unfortunately deserves a question mark, and after queen a7, queen d8, another move that protects the bishop, looks to get the pieces back into action. But the thing is, after bishop b3, yes, you can play these kind of moves like rook d6, but guess what? The current world champion is up a pawn for no compensation at all. And this is not only a massive success for this opening, but if you think about what went into this game so far, it was great preparation because, that opening should not be giving Jan as much trouble as it currently is. Rook e4, some ideas with the h4 pawn, also guarding d4, bishop e6, and Nepo is, he's struggling here. After queen to c5, Magnus has ideas like b3 and a4. There's also 1, 2, 3 very weak pawns on the board. And it's kind of cruise control for the world champion. The engine gives a commanding evaluation, well over +2, despite only being up a single pawn here. And it's just not something that the current world champion is going to mess up. It takes this pawn with check, and it is a little bit difficult to get into the details of all these moves from Magnus. But I will draw some attention to the move b3. This has the idea to go a4. And once you get a passed pawn there, you have 1, 2 passed pawns, plus this guy is hanging, and queen g3 check, king g1, there's no queen e1. So there's no perpetual here for Jan. And the problem with queen endgames, especially when your opponent has enough time to figure them out, is that you start to feel pretty helpless, as the guy in Jan's shoes here, because you're looking desperately for a perpetual, but your strong opponent is really never going to allow it. It's just not going to happen, really. So queen takes a2, queen check, queen takes b5. The queen is ready to swing back over to h5 and take that pawn. Of course, Nepo doesn't want to allow that, but look at the next move. Queen to e5, centralizing the queen, stopping queen g3, and this is just textbook stuff. This queen endgame could not get any worse for Nepo. Queen to b2, and after queen e4 check, Magnus decides to play queen d3. And he's about to execute one of the most serious plans in a queen endgame, is that you kind of bring your king to the first rank, your queen as well, and then you just, in the words of Grandmaster Yasser Seirawan, push him, baby. Push that pawn all the way down the board. Your queen stops all checks to the king, and then you just want to, you motor that pawn down the board. So Magnus is going for a very concrete plan here. And you notice how this queen is watching over all the checks. Magnus knows exactly what he's doing here. He's not going to let this chance slip away. And queen d3, queen d1, and he's executed his plan. Now, the reason that this is so devastating is that, if the queen goes in front of the pawn, well, now, as white, we basically want to, let's say we could put our king tucked away on h1, and we could do something to the effect of just pushing these pawns. Maybe queen d2 and b4 just to get that guy going. But once he gets to b5, we can even switch to the b pawn and just push as much as possible. The queen is stuck in front of the pawn, so there's nothing active that black can do. This starts to get to a Completely decisive advantage. Queen e3, king h1, g5. Nepomniachtchi is well aware that leaving the queen passive in front of the pawn does nothing. He's trying to open up the white king for some checks, but we see Magnus handle the current approach of the pawns easily. And after queen f3, we see the queen guarding 3 pawns here. So if black plays this move, yeah, it's possible. But you're not going to enjoy defending this endgame. 3 pawns down, they're all protected. You can't exchange queens, of course. And the world champion would, I mean, to be quite frank, he would win this position easily. So Nepo does not want to be a part of the torture. And I think that I call this game back, this win from the world champion, I call it back to the opening. I call it back to Team Carlsen. I think that was very, very top quality preparation. I think that it threw Nepomniachtchi off. During this game, he was sort of visibly disturbed. This move h5, not a move that you want to play. It's certainly not a position you want to be in over the board if you've never seen it before. Magnus had definitely seen it before. So I thought that this game was a real, true indication of getting the position that Magnus wants. He got a slight edge due to some opening preparation, and then he milked that edge with his technique. A blunder from Jan, very uncharacteristic, b5. I'm willing to call it the first real blunder of the World Chess Championship, and Jan finds himself in the hole here, 2 games down. This being game number 8, the players are going to have a rest day, and it starts to become very serious because with the remaining games still to play, there needs to be some immediate wins basically for Jan Nepomniachtchi, because to go into tie breaks, he needs 2 wins. It doesn't look good for him. Chances are few and far between in the World Championship. I thought it was a really impressive game by Magnus Carlsen. He won one of the positions that I think he set out to get, and it's one of those positions that he's always going to find success in. So a good game for the world champion. Very unfortunate for Team Nepo. He's going to have to bounce back, and a 2-point lead here for Magnus opens up in the World Chess Championship. We have a rest day coming up, but I will see you guys for the recap of round 9 after the rest day.